there was a report that was done by the NAACP, and I think it was 2022. And it talks about the lack of Black executives and how that has hampered the representation of Black characters. And so many times we focus in on negative portrayals, criminals and things like that, drug dealers and things like that. But I remember the conversation that the showrunner for Falcon and the Winter Soldier had with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin on the Fat Man Beyond show. And he said that he wanted to write a different show, a different Falcon, but he wasn't allowed by Marvel. And he bucked heads with them until he finally gave into the Marvel process. Now, a lot of people listening to that might think that it might have meant the production process, but obviously it also means the portrayal of the character. He wanted to write a different character, and he wasn't allowed to do it. After going back and reviewing that interview in preparation of doing my Falcon video, I was struck by the fact that Mark Bernardin, a brother, was talking to the showrunner, and instead of asking him if the showrunner had any plans or wanted to originally dive into the background of Falcon, the guy who's going to become Captain America and is going to carry that mantle. Instead, he asked about the Isaiah Bradley character and whether they were going to go back and do anything with that character, maybe another show or whatever that was going to explore his background. And I found that interesting that we would focus on that character and not on the main character, a person that we still don't know anything about, particularly when you compare it to the representation that was given to Captain America in the movies that showed his background, what made him the person that he was. And so when you look at this in that NAACP report that says that the lack of Black executives, particularly ones who can make decisions, the lack of that leads to subpar representation on the screen. And what happens is you get negative messages that influence the attitudes and behaviors of our community. That's why it says even though all this representation, it still is having a detrimental effect on our community, the Black community. And when you look at Marvel, I would submit that one, either having characters there who are supposed to be heroes, but we don't get anything about them, don't get any story. Even other characters of color are getting shows and movies and TV shows and are getting more information about who they are, but our Black characters, men and women, aren't. And to me, that's detrimental. And I think that's part of what they documented. It basically says that our story doesn't matter. Even when we're represented, our story doesn't matter. And then to add to that, Nick Fury, one of the oldest Black characters in the MCU, I don't know which is worse, not having a story or having a story, but having 4 out of 6 episodes have people basically rip apart our concept of who we thought you were. Once you do that, you can't go back. Your mind notices it. It's part of that negative message. He's basically an absentee stepfather. Now, in this episode, you have the wife talking lovingly of looking at him for hours as he sat at the table and the sun kissed his skin. Oh, it's all beautiful writing, but it's like, that's not what you were saying 2 episodes ago. You were basically telling him to his face, look, you weren't here before the blip, and after the blip, you were gone for a second time. You can't undo that. We in the Black community, Black men and women who are watching this, as beautiful as some of those scenes were, you still had so many other scenes that were detrimental and sending negative messages and influences. And so we have to take both of those and roll those around in our mind and try to come to some kind of consensus that, okay, Nick Fury is Nick Fury, but Nick Fury is also an absentee father and absentee dad, And then even in this scene, Nick Fury goes out of the way to say that the thing that gave him that brain that he has in his head, even though we're being told that he wasn't as good as we all thought he was, but put that to the side. The reason he has the brain that he has in his head that allows him to be ahead of everybody and to think 20 steps ahead is because of his single mom and his wife. So once again, no father. Now, I don't know the story of Nick Fury in the comic books, but for this Nick Fury as played by Samuel L. Jackson, he had a single mom, and it was a single mom who gave him the brain he had. There was no dad, and so he didn't have a dad, and he's become like an absentee father and husband to his quote-unquote stepson. And so again, you have to talk about the negative messages. And I think the people who write these things, they don't stop to consider these messages. Why are we? And I've seen other YouTubers who have watched this show, they're all talking about the deconstruction of Nick Fury. Why do we have to deal with the deconstruction for 4 episodes just to have a glimpse of the real Nick Fury at the end. It's like, why are we going through these mental gymnastics? Why are the writers doing this to us? They don't do that to any other character, male or female. Yes, we had fans who got upset about Fat Thor. Had fans who got upset about the deconstructing of Loki in a series, but at least you had characters to do that with. You knew who they were, and you had all of those character moments, particularly for Loki. You could go back and they could go back and revisit those character defining moments. And that's the point. He had character defining moments for his character, just like Thor had character defining moments, just like Tony Stark had character defining moments, just like Hawkeye, just like Scarlet Witch. Like all of these characters, even the new characters that are coming in, have already been given character defining moments and backgrounds. But when it comes to the rest of the Black representation in the MCU, with the exception of 4 characters, T'Challa, Shuri, Killmonger, and Gamora, 3 of whom are technically dead. T'Challa and Killmonger are gone. Gamora has essentially been replaced because the original Gamora, who had experienced all these character moments, doesn't exist. And with the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie done, we don't even know if she's coming back. So that only leaves Shuri with any kind of significant character background. And Shuri's most memorable character moments came at the expense of a beloved character. And that boneheaded decision by the studio led to a split in the Black Panther fandom between the recast T'Challa, which I'm a part of, and the other crowd, which says just get over it. And of course, it led to the second movie in the series, Wakanda Forever, grossly underperforming in relationship to the first movie by a tune of over $500 million. And that's unadjusted for inflation. When you adjust the Black Panther box office for inflation, you see just how badly Wakanda Forever did in comparison to it. When we come to the rest of the roster of Black characters, some of whom are supposed to be the leaders going forward, we have none of those character-defining moments in TV shows or movies. The Wonderful Women of Wakanda did not get their TV show. It is still stalled. We don't know if we'll ever get Blade, and none of the other characters have been offered TV shows or movies of their own to define their characters. There is a debate going on now among YouTubers about whether Rhodey's character has been ruined by revealing that he's a Skrull, and also the director or the showrunner coming out and giving hints to when in the MCU timeline when Rhodey was replaced, even hinting that he might have been replaced right after the events of Civil War, which means that the Rhodey we saw after that was always the Skrull. And then there are others who are arguing that no, it made more sense for him to be replaced later. But they're saying that Rhodey was the obvious choice to replace with the Skrull. And the whole conversation is crazy because, again, as Don Cheadle himself acknowledged, we don't know anything about his character. So now you're replacing what little we did know with another character, which is basically what you did to Nick Fury in Secret Invasion. So the whole thing is just mind-boggling, particularly when you consider, as I'm saying, the subpar representation, and now you're just replacing them with Skrulls and having key scenes acted out, and we're finding out that it's Skrulls. It's like it's adding insult to injury, if you ask me. So that's just my opinion on it. I think it's just showing just how lopsided the character representation has been and continues to be in the MCU.